everyone to today's webinar from the Open Group, which today is being brought to us by BizDesign, and we're very lucky to have Mark from BizDesign who will be presenting for us today. You'll all know that BizDesign is a very active member of the Open Group, and they have a number of webinars for us over the past few years. Before I hand over to Mark, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep today's event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, with regards to questions, if you'd like to submit a question to Mark, then the best way to do that is to write your question into the text queue facility. If you do write a question in there, can I ask you to address it to all participants so everyone gets to see all the questions that are being submitted. The intention is to try and answer as many questions at the end of Mark's presentation today. If you'd still like to share a comment with a fellow attendee or just make a general comment about the topic, then probably the way to do that is in the text chat facility. This event is being fully recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early, if you experience any local technical difficulties, I know that sometimes audio can be a bit problematical in various areas. The full recording of today's event will be available tomorrow. Everyone who's registered for today's event will get an email with an appropriate link where they can access that recording. If you're ready, can I ask you to start today's presentation?
Yes, thank you, Simon. In addition to Simon's remark about the recording, we will also make the slide deck available online. I have a link at the end of my presentation pointing you to the right download link. My presentation today is maybe a bit different from what you're used to hear from me. I have been involved with the Archimate standard very much within the Open Group. It's more about a strategic topic, about how to become more adaptive as an enterprise. Here are some details about myself. I already mentioned Archimate. Enterprise architecture is my home ground, basically. But as you can see, the books I've co-authored, I've been very interested in agility, adaptivity of organizations as well. So in this presentation, we'll see these topics come together. There's not much Archimate content in there, maybe one or two slides that show a little bit of that, but most will be about how to become more adaptive as an enterprise. A few words about my employer company that supports organizations in planning, tracking and executing business change. So as you can see from the name of the company, we are in the business of designing your business. Of course, Guard qualifies us as a leader in the Magic Quadrant for enterprise architecture, but it's not just enterprise architecture that we are concerned with. And today's presentation is also that it will be much broader than just about architecture-related issues. It will cover many other topics as well. The presentation of today is based on a booklet, an e-book that I've written together with a colleague of mine, Peter Matthijssen. You will also get a download link to that at the end of the presentation. That provides more background on the topics of today. What I'm going to talk about is how organizations can become better at change, and that's what we call the adaptive enterprise. So it will be about our vision on change, how you should attack. And then the meat of the presentation is these 6 key capabilities that we see as very important. Who's that and how you can support that. And we'll provide some conclusions, recommendations, and these pointers I mentioned. So material available for download. Excuse my voice a bit. I've got a cold, so I might sound a bit creaky in places. So sorry about that. It's clear enough for you to understand. The presentation itself. If you and the change environment of organizations, you see that looking simply at the statistics is that companies live shorter and shorter. So change is happening faster than ever. And the graph shows that. It's based on actual data from InnoSight and other sources. It's the lifespan of companies in the Standard & Poor's 500 index. And you can see that companies get shorter and shorter. Of course, the wave pattern you see here has to do with the economic cycle, but you see the general trend that companies have a shorter and shorter life. So if you want to survive in this dynamic environment, you better be very good at change. Important trend, of course, of the last 20 or 30 years is digitization, and especially in the last few years, we've seen extreme examples of that. Companies that have no assets at all anymore. Companies like Uber with no fleet of cars. Companies like Airbnb, which owns no hotel rooms. So digitization is an important driver for change as well, and it speeds change. It creates an even more turbulent environment for companies than they used to have. At the same time, you see that organizations are under pressure from other directions as well. Things like regulatory authorities, risks from cybersecurity, all kinds of pressures that make it very important to be able to change. And just looking at the kinds of business questions that organizations have, these are just sections put on one slide. Your strategic scenarios, your customer experience. How do you change your business model in this dynamic environment? What abilities do you need for the future? Your projects support your strategy, etc., etc., etc. So many questions that business leaders need to answer, and that all these answers are connected. It's not just answering questions in isolation. It's all connected. You need these answers very quickly because this speed of change is so high. How do you do that? How do you deal with these pressures? That's the focus of today. We surveyed on business change, on business transformation earlier this year, together with the Open Group and a number of other partners, and over 500 people responded to that survey. The respondents were in two main groups, management and C-level on the one hand, and architects and let's say business designers on the other. And they found what their opinion was that looking at this issue of transformation is that changing your business model is really the top driver for C-level and for senior management. They see a lot of pressure on existing business models and they see the need to change that. And digitization is often in the round of that as the driver for changing these business models. There are various kinds of strategic events, things like mergers and acquisitions that have a big impact on companies, driving this need for transformation. Looking at the winners, we see that they are a bit more focused on this digitization issue. Well, looking at the kind of practitioners we asked, of course, they are in the architecture and IT sphere, so that's very understandable. Business model again scores very high, and also have to deal with is cost pressure. So, well, they look quite alike, and the kind of pressures they have to deal with are pretty similar. See some inhibitors of transformation as well, especially business as usual, legacy software, legacy procedures, legacy people, if you want to call it that. It's often an issue to change your existing ways that inhibit you in transformations. But there are some issues there, especially a lack of these, well, what we call the strategic design insights. Knowing what's going to happen if you try to change something. What are the connections? What are the duties that you have in your organization? What can you change? What's difficult to change? Number three, of course, a lack of organizational commitment. Everybody will recognize that. Cultural resistance is often a big inhibitor of change as well. So this complexity of the business as usual combined with the lack of insights in how to change are the top two drivers in becoming more top two inhibitors in changing and becoming more adaptive. Also, these participants in this survey, what they do to change and stay in control. And here are just some of the things they mentioned. For example, agile development or a bimodal strategy. That's certainly something that's very hot in the IT world right now. Ability-based planning as a way of focusing your energy on the right things. Avoiding red tape and bureaucracy, also very important in becoming more adaptive and making it easier. But still, you have to be in control. You don't want to stifle every innovation, but you do need some structure, especially in highly regulated environments. It's a very complicated balance. Well, we also have this need for a large transformation is a sign that an organization has waited too long to change. see the big change, maybe you're already too late. It would be easier to take smaller steps and continue to change the organization and stay in tune with your environment instead of waiting for several years until the need has become so great that a very big and very risky kind of change will get you out of the problems you're in right now. But of course, this continues requires a kind of culture and an environment that facilitates that kind of change. Otherwise, you end up on the left-hand side, and you will need to do these huge, big risk changes. That's, I would say, huge fail as well. I think about 70% of major transformation efforts fail if you look at the numbers. How do you become an organization that's good at this continuous change, that's adaptive, that makes it easier to change? To quote the Charles Darwin on adaptivity, of course, it's not strength or intelligence, it's about being adaptable to change. So if your environment changes, you change with it. Organization is really strong, but in let's say an outdated kind of business, if you change, use famous examples of Kodak or a bit more recently Nokia. They own their own market in a sense, but they lost it due to innovations that they didn't keep up with. So it's important to change with your environment and not just being the biggest, the best in a market that may be outdated in a few years. So then, things that we've identified as being key for such an adaptive enterprise, and I will read all of these. I will walk through them and show you how you can become better at these. So we see capabilities as crucial to foster adaptivity. So first of all, the ability to simplify. If we look at nations, you see them the simplest survive the longest. Certainly in the animal kingdom, that's true. If you look at that animals that have evolved over several hundred of millions of years, like crocodiles, in a sense they're simple. They avoid risky complexity, and I think complexity is the main enemy of change, because if you have kinds of interconnections in your organization, what will happen if you change something? If these are really causing all kinds of undesirable side effects, a big inhibitor of change. We saw that in our survey as well. The current organization, the legacy, that was the main inhibitor of change, and often it's because of complexity. So you really need to simplify the bureaucracy, the red tape, simplify IT systems in particular, of course. We all know about the complexity of legacy systems. So simplification is very important. That's not that easy. It's easier said than done, of course. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you need to understand the complexity. Being background in modeling, I would say models, Archimate models, other models are very useful in understanding this complexity, creating the transparency you need to really see what's happening, to see what's connected to which other parts. I think that's a very important contribution of this whole world of modeling. You can't just do that, let's say, using text. If you have a piece of prose describing the complexity of your organization, how would you understand that in ways that help you reduce that complexity? Are really the way to go there. Model, of course, can only create insight and can help you design things, but it won't make the organization itself simpler. So another important way of simplification, creating what you could call business capabilities. And I've put a reference at the bottom. Roger Sessions has written an interesting book about that, called Architectures for Complex Enterprises, and he also argues for this. You have an organization that can evolve on their own, that own their provide coherent, self-sufficient business capabilities to their environment, using clear services and interfaces. That's one way of simplifying the structure of your organization. This notion in various other kinds of literature as well. Some of you might know the famous book Enterprise Architecture as Strategy, which also describes this maturity model enterprises. And the fourth level of maturity is also about business modularity. That's the same idea, having independence in your business that make it easier to change things, rather than have this big lump of spaghetti, this big complicated hairball where you can't change anything without changing all the rest of your organization. Capability is then a very useful technique to help you define and plan the structure for this. So defining the capabilities you need to have in this context and defining how you want to realize these capabilities. So just in some pictures, I couldn't resist putting in an Archimedes picture. This is from an actual client. This is a diagram I even drew myself at a client. A complicated application landscape. The challenge was to separate out part of this because it would be transferred to another organization. Using models provides a kind of insight that you reduce this complexity. Seeing all these connections, knowing where you want to cut this, what to transfer to this other organization, that's of course a very important kind of insight. Then ability map. This is inspired by a reference model for the insurance sector. Having these clear views of your capabilities is very, very useful. Understanding your business. A capability map, a good capability structure is defined in terms, is understood by the business, but not just business, also by the broader organization, because capabilities are very recognizable. In an insurance company, we'll know about claim management as a very, very important capability. We'll know about asset management. We'll know that this kind of structure really describes what they do. Fairly high level of abstraction capability maps are very useful instruments. They use them to plot other kinds of information on top of them. Capability heat maps. Example, I've just used them to depict the efficiency of certain capabilities. You got investments on them, or maybe the technology that supports these capabilities. Just recently, I created one that showed which capabilities are supported by technology that's at the end of its cycle, so they are in danger. Management finds that kind of information very useful. And because these maps have structure, people recognize them, they understand their business, and plotting kinds of information on top of such a recognizable map really creates a lot of insight. I'm a fan of these kind of heat maps, these kinds of capability maps. They are very useful. Based on your capability maps, your current and future capabilities, and on these heat maps, you can also dig deeper. Look at the capabilities in more detail. Look at the different dimensions of capabilities and start planning for the future. Here, the print is a bit small, so it might be not that easy to read, but here we have a few capabilities where you see the current and future state with the spiderweb diagrams, and you see, for example, this marketing capability on the top left. You see that it needs to grow in the process dimension. You see that it's really bad currently and that really needs to improve there. This kind of is really useful to help you plan for the future, to know where to improve these capabilities, where needs to be seen, and this focuses your investments as well. Again, using this notion of capabilities is very useful to create a relatively simple, understandable view of the organization, focusing investments, focusing your efforts, and helping the organization evolve quicker and easier. The first capability that you need as an adaptive enterprise. Adaptation is also about innovation. You have to be able to try new things, evolving from evolving into new areas, trying out new business models, trying new technology, etc. Trying new things is very important as an adaptive enterprise. Don't innovate. If innovation is stifled by bureaucracy, you will never become truly adaptive. You won't be able to change with the times. But we do have a lot of issues with this. If you're an older organization and have a lot of IT systems that need a lot of budget for maintenance, you might suffer what's called the innovation squeeze. All budget goes to just keeping the shop open, keeping your legacy systems running. Nothing is left for innovation. And on the other hand, where do you look for opportunities for innovation? It's also not easy to find these. And as we know, many innovations might fail. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, you need a sound balance between the investments. If you only invest in your legacy systems, well, no budget for innovation, you will not be able to change, and eventually your organization will become outdated and perhaps disappear. So it is not just a not-have, it's really a need to have. It's a must-have in the current turbulent environment. So doing this is really looking closely at where you invest, using techniques like portfolio management to assess your investments, divide investments into different categories beforehand, so not just allocating everything to all these projects at once to just fix the current issues with your legacy systems, but keeping budgets separately in a portfolio of innovations. Also balancing risk and investment. You might want to have some, say, smaller investments in high risk innovations, just try things out, then have a larger investment in lower risk innovations, and of course you will invest a lot in keeping the current business running as well. Another thing to do is really know what you're good at, know your strengths. Most can flourish in the best if they really exploit what they are good at. If you only try to fix what you're not good at, you're never going to really excel. You're never going to outperform your competitors. You might be able to keep up with them, but really to outperform them, you need to focus on the things you're really good at. You also want to look at new business models. Looking at the capabilities you have or that you might develop, how could you make from those? How could you invest in such a way that these new business models create a good return as well? So looking at what can you do with your current and future capabilities, how could you exploit these in different ways, find ways of making money from those. That's of course a very useful approach as well. One technique that might help you with this is the business model canvas. Many of you know this. Here I've just created a picture showing a business model canvas of an insurance company. Again, well, if you know me from the world, you know about the ARC Insurance example that was used. This is also from this example. Here we see a cat depicting all these sticky notes used to depict the business model of ARC Insurance. And here we see things like the key partners, the key activities and key resources that the insurance company has to provide its value propositions, the customer which it provides these via various channels, and the relationships it wants to build with these customers, of course, to gain revenue streams from the different customer segments to pay that the organization has. So a high-level depiction of the business model of this automobile insurance company currently, of course, just how it's now. This can be used to develop new business models as well. I could really recommend the business model generation that's behind the business model canvas. That is really inspiring if you're looking for new kinds of business models. It helps you invent and these different kinds of business models. Really an inspiring book. So that's the strategy part. Then, of course, this notion of change requires many different people to be involved. It's not, in modern organizations, it's not something you can just do in a top-down way. Organizations are social entities. Many people are involved in change. You have a lot of expertise in these different parts of the organization. And moreover, the top-down style of change is just too slow. It's not effective. If you really want to change rapidly, you have to collaborate and cooperate horizontally. So not wait until the upper level management says, well, we go in this direction, please march along. No, you need to work together with your colleagues in different departments and different layers of the organization, and together institute change. And that's, of course, a major challenge for many organizations. This is a change as well. So collaboration in change is not just something you fix in an organization overnight. If the organization really has this hierarchical culture, this might take some time to change. But then again, if you don't change, you will probably be stuck in the past and your organization might cease to exist at all. So how do you do this? How can you work together more effectively? So, of course, you need to empower the people involved. In the lean management world, they call this the people with the profound knowledge of the organization, of the business processes, the people that really know how things operate. And this knowledge will change. It's not just the upper level management that sets direction, it's also people at the shop floor that really know where the improvements are made, what customers really want, etc. You really have to involve all these people, and just within your organization also, and increasingly across the borders of your organization. It's your ecosystem and seeing who you can work with, all the different partners that are involved, all the different companies, all the different other organizations in that ecosystem. Customer journey as a technique is very useful to understand how your customers perceive your services and products. And those journeys also span across this ecosystem. Many organizations are just one chain in one link in a long chain of steps that a customer goes through. And this is also very important to see this full customer journey end to end, to really see how these customers experience you. You need to facilitate people to work together as well. Some collaborative platform that brings these people together, that facilitates them in sharing information, sharing ideas, sharing designs of your enterprise, working on change. That's highly important. We'll get to that later on as well. Pictures that illustrate this. Here we have a picture of an ecosystem. It looks a bit messy, but usually most ecosystems are quite messy. Lots of organizations involved. And here, this is from a financial that target millennials in mobile payments and things like that. See a high-level picture of that ecosystem, and with different kinds of relationships between the different actors. You could zoom in on this to see what's really happening between these parties. But this to give you one example of that. Looking more closely at customers, you see the details of these relationships. And here we have a customer journey of a healthcare company, health insurer, and we see how different channels and different acts by people who want to find good health insurance. So here we see 4 phases that a potential customer goes through. First, an awareness phase, and in this case, it's about health insurance that's offered through the employer. So you go to your employer side, you go to the health insurance side, and then you're going to investigate what your best options are by talking to friends and family, perhaps, looking at social media, and finally you purchase a health insurance. We also see the emotions, the feelings of the potential customers and how they travel through this process. This is a very useful way of seeing how your customers perceive you, and of course this is often a very starting point for change as well. If you have this insight, it really helps you to determine where you need to improve your customer satisfaction, so that these customers at the end of this process, for example, really purchase your kind of insurance and that they don't go to your competitor. So this side is very useful, and it's a collaborative thing. It's not something that only addresses what you do. Say you're the health insurer. If you look at this picture, you only see your organization in some of these steps, but you see that there's a larger ecosystem involved as well. So collaborating across the borders of your own organization is very important, understanding this customer journey, and that holds for many organizations. Every has that provides a product through some other channel, or that acquires customers via some other channel, or that has some suppliers or partners involved in its ecosystem. It's very important to provide this kind of creative information. And the issue is that change happens ever faster. Or as somebody recently put it to me, change will never be as slow again as it is today. Well, that's rather a confrontational statement if you look at the speed change that we have already. And it's only going to speed up. Change happens ever faster. So you have to accelerate. You have to become quicker at changing your own organization. How do you do that? Well, the only you change the way you change. If you're an organization that has a classical, let's say, waterfall style change process, that's not going to be enough. It's too slow. You really have to change. And even if your change process is fast at the moment, it has become faster. So you have to keep changing and improving the way you change. The thing that can help you with this is what in the startup world is called the fail fast mentality. Try developing a minimal viable product, putting it in the market, trying whether it works or not, and adapt. It's really important to have this kind of mentality. It's not wrong to fail. It's not a bad thing. You learn from it. If you learn, of course, then it's wrong. But fail is really a good way to accelerate change. But still, you have to balance speed and control. If you're in highly regulated markets, they can't just speed up. They really have to make sure that they comply with all the regulations that are in place. So you need some way of controlling what's happening and still speed up change. That models are a very useful way of doing this. And here I see two ways of using these models. The first is also the first point. You can use these scale models to evaluate different scenarios and assess the impact of changes, implement them. That may avoid expensive rework and try things out in the small, and it also helps you reduce the risks of these changes. One way of speeding up change by using models. Another way is these models into execution engines, so that you don't have to do any complicated and costly hand coding, but just use the models themselves and execute them. That's also much quicker implementing than when you really have to go deep into the code, especially if you have these complicated legacy systems. Well, you know all about the filters of change there. So we see that organizations over the last 10 or 15 years have been using things like business process and rule engines and feed models into them to make it easier to change the business logic of the organization without having to go into the code. And this does not mean advocate a top-down, big design up-front way of using these models. It's really about doing this in short cycles, involving the different levels of the organization in trying out these models, seeing what works, and have this fail-fast mentality up to these models. So it's not the traditional waterfall style of having big specifications, big models, and only then going to implementation. It's also using models to quickly adapt and change at a local level, collaboratively with these different people involved. One way of using, so that's about the scenarios. The first bullet point was to find the impact of a change. So here, if you have, say, a dashboard showing the risks associated with certain applications, if you can drill down from that to what the different relationships of this application with its environment are, this is information. If you would decide to, say, phase out this application, you really need to know what it's connected to. So that kind of information at your fingertips really helps you decide if this change is feasible, what this should be, and how to approach that. So this is the example of this first type of use of models, this trying things in change scenarios, using models, and having to go into reality and trying whether you could switch off this application. This is a kind of use. Having business process models, in this case BPMN, which you can feed into your execution engine and just designing the change at the model level and immediately implementing that. It's also making change happen a lot faster than when you have to go through code. The next KPI is important is decision making. Organizations have to change the way they make decisions, and I've already alluded to that in other parts of the presentation as well. It's not feasible to really have this top-down slow decision making process. What I see is that in many organizations, management feels really insecure about change because they just don't know what the effects will be. So sometimes they're kind of paralyzed. They like in the headlights. They see change coming, but they don't know what to do because they don't know what the effects will be. And like decisions made at many different levels of the organization at the same time, waiting for people higher up in the organization to decide for you is just no longer feasible. It's too slow. These people often don't have the right information. But still, sure that these different decisions made at different parts of the organization, at different levels by different people in different disciplines, are all along the same goals. You want to move in this direction as an organization. It's not just a collection of individuals. Of course, you have a number of organizational goals. So how do you organize this? How do you create a new kind of decision making with this hierarchical, bureaucratic top-down structure, but still make sure that things are aligned? What we important to have a single source of truth. Make sure that the information on the, let's say, the makeup of your enterprise comes together at one place where all the people involved can work together, have the information available to make the right decisions. To have this information available, it also makes it easier to delegate authority to people instead of having to wait for the higher ups to decide. If you don't have this information, it's often just upper level management that has the authority to decide based on their gut feeling, and everyone in the organization has to always his or her decisions. But if you don't have the facts, all these decisions are relegated to the upper levels, which is way too slow. People over there don't have the information either, so their decisions are probably just as bad as if they had been made at the lower levels. Making sure that information is available is very important. Creating kinds of dashboards with the right information for the right people involved. There we go. And again, of course, models are sort of the foundation for creating these dashboards, providing the information, for linking it, for ensuring between different different decision makers. It brings information and it helps you really make sure that everybody's on the same page. So dashboards, this dashboard, in this case, it's about application portfolio management. So what we see here is a dashboard of lots of applications with their health, their risk, the cost, business value, technical value, etc. And actually, the previous slide I showed you with the drill down from set off into the impact of change, that's from this same group. So how dashboards, in this case, it would typically be a manager looking at his or her IT portfolio and seeing how healthy that is, and then down from here into the impact of any changes you want to make. That's, of course, a way of helping decision makers make the right decisions. Drill down, in this case, into this application lifecycle graph, as Gartner calls it, a time analysis for tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate the 4 quadrants. And as you know, Gartner pictures everything is in 4 quadrants. And you want the upper right-hand corner, of course, so you want to be in the green part in this case. Well, this is the kind of picture that helps you get on your application landscape. These are very familiar, these bubble charts. You can refine them, of course, and make them a bit more, and not have just 4 categories, recommendations for your applications, but you get the picture. Drilling down this IT application landscape using the same colors to show this lifecycle advice gives you a picture like this. We see the applications plotted on basically a capability map of the organization. You see that, for example, in the lower left-hand corner, capability sees most of its applications to be eliminated in the future. That's something I, as a manager, would like to know if I'm responsible for this. Well, my capability will lose most of its application support. That's certainly something that's going to be very important. Usually in the same story, you can plot the development over time, and if you're responsible for let's say reducing cost, if you're a CIO and have to reduce the IT landscape, this is the kind of information you'd like to see. By the way, you see a lot of simplification here. The first capability I started with, It's reducing applications, making life simpler. And in this case, these are pictures from an actual client of ours. That was one of the drivers as well. Cost reduction, changed by reducing complexity. This is the type board that will be useful in that kind of context. Then finally, sixth capability you need to have is the ability to be in control. So nice, but you always have to stay in control as well. You can't just change as fast as you like. Many organizations are in highly regulated environments. Well, finance, healthcare, or government are examples of that, but many others as well. So you have to make sure that you're compliant. And what helps that is to create transparency, seeing how the organization operates, and know for a fact that many regulatory authorities explicitly ask for this. They even want to, at least in some cases, and they even want to see the your processes and of your architecture to make sure that you are compliant. So transparency is important. Also, in the risks you run and where the risks are and how to mitigate against these, it's very important. And we increasingly see cybersecurity as a driver for these risk analyses. Over the last few years, even the last 3 or 5 years, we've seen a huge rise in attacks on organizations. Attacks sophisticated, and you really need to be in control there. And this is one example of the kind of risk you want to analyze. Depending on your industry, different risks arise in different areas. Here, picture using this cyber risk as an example. Here we see, at the top, we see an Archimate picture where an overlay is used of risk concepts that are specializations of Archimate concepts. I'm not going to go into the details here, but the Open Group last year published a white paper on using Archimate for doing modeling, and that's what's being here. And we do a risk analysis by connecting these different things together. And because we have this model, it's not just a picture, because we have a model behind this, you can really see what the effects are, say, a vulnerability, the capacity and threat to exploit that vulnerability, and the risk you run and the loss you might have from that. Do these kinds of analyses based on models really helps you to understand the risk you run, where you need to mitigate those, and a very, very important driver for change in organizations. So looking at this notion of the adaptive enterprise, being in control also entails being in control of your risks. So this kind of analysis is also highly important in organizations that are changing. A very different specification is, in this case, of the decisional and notation standard for depicting the business logic of an organization. So, are you compliant with the rules that apply to, in this case, assessing insurance claims? Of course, regulators will have a lot to say about that. Internally, externally, your own financial risk people will look at this. The external regulators will look at this. So having these rules in place and having them made explicit is also very important to create the transparency needed to ensure compliance. Finally, these 6 capabilities, we get to the point of how do you support this? That's of course where we come as a software company. We think that it's very important to use software to support these change capabilities. You digitize your change capability as well. It's not just like all organizations are doing, digitizing your operational capabilities. You also have to support all these using digital technology. And that's what we found in this survey I mentioned at the beginning. The expectations of the participants about the role of software, they really expect software to play a very important role in change. If you look at the green bars here, you can see that. I would say in cultural change and in leadership, you see that software doesn't really play such an important role. Of course, you can understand that. But in all the areas, we see that it's very, very important. And of course, that's completely understandable. We also change in the way software is used to support change capabilities. To be just models to support some projects, to make some designs. Currently, software used for decision-making purposes, creating these dashboards that I showed you, and of course that's the current state of the art. But we're really developing towards more continuous forms of change, where organizations platform to bring the people together that work on change and really together create this adaptivity that organizations need. So it's decision making at the top. It's really supporting this continuous change process as a whole. What's really the vision also behind Biz Design as a company? Using the software to support change. If you look at the name of our organization, Biz Design, about designing, that's always been the core of what we do. So it's about using software to align the strategy, the people, the processes, and technology. You can have data that you couldn't handle on paper. It provides you with insights that a simple spreadsheet won't get you, because the models have in a platform like ours, in languages like Archimate, can provide you with lots of insights in dependencies that a simple, let's say, spreadsheet in Excel wouldn't give you. You can analyze based on that. You can communicate the information in all kinds of nice graphical ways, and this fact-based decision-making that you need to your organization as quickly as possible. So this is the one picture, the one slide about our own products. I won't bore you with commercial talk about that, but what we see here as most important are the disciplines we support. The business model and strategy, governance, risk and compliance, portfolio management, etc. These disciplines are all involved in change. And I talked about capabilities until now, but these together, they have to make this happen. They have to really make sure that these capabilities are realized. So all these different people in this slide, and I won't list them all to you, they work together on change. So top left-hand side, visionaries and strategists at the C-level in the boardroom, to on the right hand, your data managers, people who are involved with our systems in detail, all work on change. So together, these different realize the capabilities that you need to have as an adaptive enterprise. So concluding, we really advocate to support continuous change, to get away from this big change, these transformations that are really disruptive and are really risky for your organization. You have to get to a culture where you're continuously changing, and that doesn't mean there is no disruptive change at all anymore. Of course, if say technology innovation really disrupts your business, well, yes, you have to change in a big step way instead of the small step way. But having this sort of change, having this continuous change as the way of working in your adaptive enterprise, that's really the way to go. Is the second aspect that it's about horizontally working with all these different people instead of vertically waiting for the top to decide, then the decisions to trickle down into the rest of the organization. This can only be done by digitizing your change capability. It's not anymore to just do it with pen and paper or with simple office tools. It really requires sophisticated software to support your change. So that presentation, here I have 3 links for you to provide you with some extra information. The first is this Adaptive Enterprise booklet that I mentioned at the start that provides more detail on our vision. So my presentation is just scratching the surface of that. Results from this survey that I showed you are also available for download, and the slides, of course. So this presentation you can download from the bottom link. And that, I think I hand over to Simon again to see if there are any questions that you have for me.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, we do have a few questions in the Q facility, and this is a good opportunity. If you have any questions for Mark, please do write them in the text Q facility. So the thing I can do, Mark, is just work my way through these. A question here asking how do you institutionalize hub and spoke model so adaptive model is self-sustainable and not crisis-driven?
I'm not sure what's meant by the hub and spoke model in this case. But well, the main issue, of course, is that this is a cultural change. So if you're in a crisis, of course, you have to fix the crisis first. But it's really about the leadership that sees the need for becoming more adaptive and create this culture of change. So it's really about this delegation of authority. That's really dependent on making sure that the people you want to delegate to have the information they need to make the decisions at the local level. I think that's the main issue, and it also means that management need, well, let's say, the confidence to really have in the rest of the organization that they can make the decisions at these local levels. So I think that's a big part. So it really also comes down to the culture at the management level. If traditional hierarchical culture there, probably this is going to be very difficult. If that hierarchical culture doesn't change, probably your organization will lose against competitors that do have this more adaptive kind of culture. So business leadership will recognize this need for change, so they see that this has to be done. But it is really a cultural change, but it's fueled by providing the right information to people so that they go to their bosses, that they can really make these decisions.
Question, how do you quantify the financial contribution of the modelling activities? There you go. That is, how much revenue does your France, for example, generate from this activity, or how many points of improved margin did it achieve?
That's very much on the kind of improvement you're talking about. In some cases, easy. If you're talking about cost reduction for application landscape, for example, a big driver for application portfolio management. Just the client used the pictures from in, I think, 4 years' time, improved its or reduced its IT cost with, I think, 24%. So the example where we contributed. Of course, the actual cost reduction is in switching off these old applications. Provided the insights that help that. But in many cases, it's not that easy. Of course, becoming adaptive and becoming quicker change, it's not easy to quantify in a simple business case. It's like asking for the business case of sensible management. So what that deliver you? Of course, it's kind of a silly question. It's like well, I think Gartner recently wrote a report about the business case for enterprise architecture, and they sort of advocate against using a business case way of looking at enterprise architecture as a way of motivating that, because you can't just make the case in such a simple way. But think portfolio management, which is about money, is a way to such business cases. So yes, then in that case, it's fairly easy.
Question here. Do organizations require more agility coaches rather than scrum masters in the age of disruption?
They require more, but I think they do require consultants, coaches, or whatever you want to call them, that help management to see the need and become more adaptive or amenable to change. And many organizations, they see, well, agile, that's something that the IT guys do, the software engineers. It's just this way of working that they like because they don't have to commit to anything. And so there's, I think at a management level, there's often some negative view on agile as a buzzword. But I do think that at this management, organizations really need to be and be more aware of the need for change and how to do that. So yeah, maybe they do need more, well, agility coaches. Maybe they shouldn't call it agility because then it's perhaps viewed as something having to do with IT only because of this connotation of the word agile. But in a sense, that is needed.
That's great. Enoch asks, so at the end of this process, when enterprise has adopted these principles, how would we measure the effectiveness of this initiative?
Of course, effectiveness in sense would be that you still exist as an organization, that you can compete, that you're not out of business, or that maybe even you compete even you did before, and that you've outmaneuvered your competitors. It is, of course, similar to the previous question about, let's say, the business case. It's not always that easy to quantify. Many of these things, often management asks for things like business cases, but we all know that you can tweak a business case as much as you want, but it's often not really a reflection of reality. And especially in this world changing circumstances, the business case itself is also something that will change over time. So it's not really about, let's say, defining a business case today and then in 3 years' time saying, oh yes, we made the business case work. No, it's about making sure that you move with the times and that you're change at the right moment to stay in business. I think success is it's survival of the fittest. If you look at Darwinism, survival of the fittest is sort of a tautology. It's survival of the survivors, because what does it mean to be fit? Well, it means that you are able to survive. So in that sense, I think it's not as simple as traditional business case analyses.
That's great. Question from Chandra. How should an organisation of a board view adjusted rate of return against planned ROI? Goes on, how should the culture of market adjustments make to strategic imperatives?
I think it's sort of similar to the previous questions. If you're talking about return, the ROI of investments, certainly something you still need to consider. One of the things you need to do, and I'm not a financial expert, but one of the things I think you need to do in this area is make sure that it's clear what your margin of error is. You might want to have a much clearer statement about the uncertainty of the ROI, given the uncertainty in the circumstances that your organization is in. It's often way too easy to doctor a business case in such a way that the ROI always seems positive, but it's about predicting the future, and you really have to be clear about all these uncertainties, and these uncertainties be bigger and bigger. So things like net present value and ROI, it's something you still probably want to do, but you're much clearer about all the uncertainties associated with them. So provide some margin and be clear about how you came up with that margin and why you estimated certain uncertainties. I think that's something you really need to do instead of providing just a simple number, because it's misleading. And if one is smart enough to recognize that, they will ask for this as well. So they will just not ask you for a number, but they will ask you for all the uncertainty. What are the different lower ends of what you think might be the outcome?
Time for one more question. One from Adrienne. How do we implement this kind of thinking in a smaller organisation where budgets may not be to the scale of larger enterprises and resources are spread across multiple disciplines like architecture, business analysis and development?
Well, it's often easier in these smaller organizations because decision making is faster, because people know each other, because the levels of hierarchy are not as elaborate. You don't have to go up 3, 4, 5 to senior management. Talking about organizations that are good at change, often they are the smaller kinds of organizations because they have the legacy, they don't have the bureaucracy that these larger organizations have. And you see is indeed that budgets and responsibilities are spread out across many different parts of the organization, but that's the case in any kind of organization. The main have to make sure that these people start working together. So, large or small, in an organization that's really an adaptive enterprise, as we call it, I think this is very important to make sure that people know how to find each other, that they're on the same page, work in the same direction, the same information available so that they know if they make a decision what the effect would be on different areas of the organization, so on their peers, on their colleagues, on the audience. I think that's important, but much smaller organizations often find it easier to become more adaptive. These large, old, bureaucratic organizations that really struggle with this.
Right, we've now reached the end of our time, so I think this would be a good time to end today's event. Are there any final points you'd just like to make before I close today's event, Mark?
Well, if people want to reach me, if they have further questions, here are my contact details. Just send me an email if you want to know more, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Mark, and many thanks everyone for joining us today, and hope you'll join us in the future for another webinar with the Open Group. Thanks very much.
Thank you.